Rachel's hands moved in rapid signs across the crowded diner, defiant. Jonathan Westbrook towered over her, his $3,000 suit radiating power, voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Do you know who I am?" Silence shattered when Sophia stepped between them, signing to her father with trembling hands. "She's the woman you destroyed." What he didn't know, Rachel had been building evidence for 5 years. What she didn't know, his daughter had been searching for her for 3 months. In 48 hours, one of them would lose everything. But before I reveal what happens next, I need to know. If someone with billions tried to silence you for telling the truth, would you stay hidden or fight back? Your answer reveals everything about how you handle power. Drop it below and subscribe, because what Rachel did with those 48 hours is not what anyone expected. Also, drop your city so I know where my truth seekers are watching from. Let me take you back to where this all began. 6 days before that confrontation, the Maple Grove Diner sat on East Broad Street in downtown Columbus, Ohio, its neon sign flickering against the January darkness. Inside, the Friday evening rush roared at full chaos. Plates clattering, the espresso machine hissing like an angry serpent, the sharp scent of burnt coffee mixing with sizzling bacon grease. Rachel Martinez moved through the chaos like water finding its path. Table 6 wanted the Denver omelet, no peppers, extra cheese. Table 12, the vegetarian club with sweet potato fries, dressing on the side. Table 3, black coffee, rye toast, scrambled eggs soft but not runny. She'd memorized 47 orders without writing a single one down, her hands balancing 6 plates with the precision of a surgeon. "Order up, Rachel." The cook's voice cut through the noise. She pivoted smoothly, but her phone screen flashed from her apron pocket as she turned. $412.36. The number burned into her vision. Rent was $900, due in 6 days. The math was simple and devastating. Her hands trembled slightly as she delivered the plates. When stress hit, her fingers moved unconsciously. Small gestures, muscle memory she couldn't quite kill. She didn't realize she was signing breathe, just breathe to herself until her hand touched the silver locket at her throat. The metal was warm from her skin. She clutched it for 3 seconds, grounding herself, then released it. The lunch crowd had thinned slightly when the freezing January air announced another customer. The door swung open, letting in a blast of cold that carried the smell of coming snow. Rachel's body registered the temperature drop, goosebumps rising on her arms beneath her uniform. "Rachel, dear." The voice belonged to Dorothy Chin, 73 years old, a regular for the past 14 months, who always requested Rachel's section. Dorothy settled into her usual booth by the window, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "The usual, Mrs. Chin?" Rachel's smile felt almost genuine this time. "You know me too well." Dorothy's gaze traced Rachel's face with concern. "You look tired, honey. Pulling doubles again? Rent doesn't pay itself." Rachel forced lightness into her tone, but her phone buzzed. Another notification. Medical debt collector. Payment overdue. $87,000 remaining balance. Her chest tightened. Dorothy reached across the table, her weathered hand covering Rachel's. "You're too smart for this place. I see it. The way you calculate tips in your head instantly. The way you remember everyone's orders, their names, their stories. You're hiding something brilliant under that apron." Rachel's throat constricted. If Dorothy only knew. If anyone knew who she used to be, what she'd lost, why she was here serving coffee instead of... She pulled her hand back, gently. "Just good at my job, Mrs. Chun. Let me get your soup started." As Rachel walked away, her fingers unconsciously signed again, a habit from another life. 3 quick movements that meant invisible, safe, forgotten. She didn't notice Dorothy watching those movements with knowing eyes, recognition flickering across the elderly woman's face. The dinner rush was about to begin. Rachel had 5 hours left on her shift. Her feet already ached. The debt collectors would call again tomorrow. But for now, she'd stay invisible. She had no idea that invisibility was about to become impossible. The energy in the Maple Grove diner shifted at exactly 6:47 p.m. Rachel felt it before she saw it. The way conversations dimmed. The way heads turned toward the entrance like sunflowers tracking light. Jonathan Westbrook entered first. He moved with the particular confidence of someone who'd never been denied access to anything. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Rachel made in 6 months, tailored so precisely it looked like armor. His salt and pepper hair was styled with calculated casualness. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Cold gray, assessing, the kind of eyes that calculated a person's worth in 0.4 seconds and moved on. Behind him came a younger man in a slightly less expensive suit, nervous energy radiating from his quick movements. He held the door open, glancing around the diner like he was evaluating threats. Mr. Westbrook. The manager, Phil, materialized from the back office, his voice obsequious. We weren't expecting you tonight. Let me get your usual table ready immediately. That won't be necessary. Jonathan's voice was smooth, controlled. Exactly the right volume to be heard without appearing to raise it. The booth in the corner will suffice. Phil practically tripped over himself, clearing a table that already had customers. Of course. Rachel. He snapped his fingers at her. He'll be taking care of Mr. Westbrook's party personally. Rachel's stomach dropped, but she nodded. She knew that name. Everyone in Columbus knew that name. Jonathan Westbrook, founder and CEO of Access Tech Solutions, the billion-dollar company that developed assistive technology for people with disabilities. His face appeared on billboards around the city. Technology that bridges every gap. The irony of what was about to unfold hadn't revealed itself yet. The third person entered last, and Rachel's professional mask nearly slipped. A young woman, early 20s, with long dark hair and striking features that would have been more visible if she didn't hold herself like she was trying to disappear. She kept her eyes downcast, one hand gripping her father's elbow. Sophia Westbrook. Rachel didn't know her name yet, but she recognized the body language. Someone who'd been taught the world was dangerous, taught to make herself small. Jonathan guided Sophia to the booth with his hand on her back, positioning her against the wall, himself on the outside. The protective stance of someone shielding a possession. The nervous assistant, Rachel would later learn his name was Marcus, sat on the opposite side, creating a barrier. Good evening. Rachel approached with water glasses. Her customer service voice smooth despite her racing heart. Can I start you with something to drink? Jonathan didn't look at her. He was already scanning the menu. We'll need a few minutes. But then something happened. Sophia's hand moved, fingers forming quick shapes. She was signing, not to anyone in particular, just a small gesture of frustration. So subtle most people wouldn't notice. Rachel's body recognized it before her mind could stop the reaction. Her hands twitched, muscle memory almost responding before she clenched them around her notepad. Jonathan noticed his daughter's hands and reached over, gently stilling them with his own. Not here, sweetheart, he said quietly, then looked up at Rachel for the first time. His eyes dismissed her instantly. Waitress, irrelevant, invisible. We'll have 3 waters. No ice in hers. He ordered for Sophia without asking her, spoke about her as if she wasn't there. But then, after Rachel turned to leave, something shifted. Jonathan reached across the table and gently wiped a coffee stain from Sophia's sleeve with his napkin, his entire demeanor softening. "You always find the messiest table," he murmured, and there was genuine affection in his voice. "Just like your mother." Sophia's face brightened at the mention, her hand reaching to squeeze his. The gesture confused everything. He controlled her, yes, but he also clearly loved her. The complexity of it settled in Rachel's chest like stone. She didn't know yet that complexity would nearly destroy her. Again, 20 minutes passed in relative calm. Rachel delivered their food: grilled salmon for Jonathan, chicken Caesar salad for Marcus, and a simple pasta dish for Sophia that Jonathan had ordered without consulting her. The young woman ate quietly, occasionally glancing around the diner with curiosity that seemed almost hungry. Then Sophia stood, signing something brief to her father. "Down the hall to the right," Jonathan said, his protective instinct flaring. "Marcus will." But Sophia was already moving, asserting a tiny moment of independence. Jonathan's jaw tightened, but he let her go, his eyes tracking her until she disappeared around the corner toward the restrooms. That's when Phil, the manager, made a decision that would change everything. A party of 8 walked in, a bigger table, bigger tips. He needed the booth. With practiced efficiency, he had the busboy move Jonathan's party to a smaller table near the kitchen while they waited. Sophia returned 3 minutes later to an empty booth. Rachel watched from across the diner as confusion crossed the young woman's face. Then something else: panic. Sophia's eyes darted around the crowded restaurant, searching. She couldn't see her father from where she stood. The Friday evening crowd had multiplied, bodies packed between tables, conversations creating a wall of noise she couldn't penetrate. Sophia approached the hostess stand, her movements becoming jerky with stress. She tried to get the hostess's attention, her hands moving in signs, her face pleading. "Ma'am, you need to wait your turn." The hostess, a college student named Brittany who'd been drowning in the rush for 2 hours, barely looked up from her seating chart. Sophia's hands moved faster, more desperately. She pointed toward the empty booth, then around the restaurant. "I don't understand what you want." Brittany's frustration mounted. "Are you alone? Do you need a table?" Other customers started to notice. Some stared openly. Others looked away, embarrassed. One businessman at the bar muttered something to his colleague, and they both smirked. Brittany raised her voice, as if volume would create understanding. "Ma'am, I need you to tell me what you need." Sophia's face crumpled. She was signing frantically now, tears beginning to form, her breath coming in quick gasps. That's when something inside Rachel shattered. She saw it all at once: the young woman's fear, the crowd's discomfort, the hostess's dismissive frustration. But more than that, she saw another face, another moment. 5 years ago, a 17-year-old girl trying to make herself understood to school administrators while her father stood by, letting them decide her future without her voice mattering. The girl she'd failed to protect. The girl whose father had destroyed Rachel for trying. 5 sentences of war happened in Rachel's head. Stay invisible. You can't afford this exposure. But she's terrified and alone. Help her and risk everything you've rebuilt. Stay silent and become the person you hate. Choose. Rachel's body moved before her mind finished the debate. She dropped the plates she was carrying onto the nearest table with a loud clatter that made everyone jump. Then she sprinted across the diner floor, her worn sneakers skidding slightly on the tile as she positioned herself between Sophia and Brittany. Her hands lifted, and 5 years of forced silence exploded into fluid motion. "I see you," Rachel signed. Her smile warmed despite her racing heart. "You're safe. I can help." Sophia's entire body went rigid, her eyes brown and wet with unshed tears, locked onto Rachel's moving hands. The transformation happened in stages. Shock first, her mouth opening in a small gasp. then recognition of what was happening, then overwhelming relief so profound that her knees actually buckled slightly. "My father," Sophia signed back, her movements shaky but clear. "I can't find my father. They moved our table." "I'll help you find him," Rachel signed. "Take a breath. You're not alone." The diner had gone quiet. Everyone was watching this silent conversation, mesmerized by the rapid hand movements, the emotional intensity requiring no sound. "You sign?" Sophia's hands trembled as she formed the question. "I do." Rachel kept her smile steady. "Your father is—" She scanned the restaurant and spotted Jonathan standing near his new table, frozen, watching. Right there. But Rachel didn't recognize him, not as anyone from her past, just as the overprotective father who'd been controlling his daughter's evening. She walked with Sophia toward the table, one hand gently guiding her elbow. Jonathan Westbrook stood absolutely still, his face a study in conflicting emotions. Gratitude that someone had helped his daughter, but underneath it, something else, something territorial and threatened. His eyes assessed Rachel differently now. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was a problem. "Thank you," he said coldly. The words technically polite, but the tone dismissive. He pulled Sophia toward him, his hand possessive on her shoulder. "That won't be necessary anymore." Sophia tried to sign something to Rachel, but Jonathan was already guiding her firmly back to their table, his body language screaming, "Stay away from my daughter." Rachel stood there, her hands still tingling from signing, and felt the weight of every eye in the diner on her back. She just made herself visible. She just made herself a target. She didn't know yet that Jonathan Westbrook already knew exactly who she was. The diner erupted back into normal noise levels, but Rachel felt like she was moving underwater. She returned to her abandoned tables, apologizing for the delay, her hands shaking slightly as she refilled coffee cups. Jonathan's party left 12 minutes later. He dropped cash on the table, exact payment, no tip, and guided Sophia toward the exit with Marcus trailing behind. At the door, Sophia turned back, her eyes finding Rachel across the crowded room. She signed one quick phrase, "Thank you." Rachel's throat tightened. She nodded once. Then they were gone. Phil materialized at Rachel's elbow 30 seconds later, his face red. "My office." Now, Dorothy watched from her booth, her soup forgotten, concern etched deep in the lines of her face. Phil's office was barely larger than a closet, stacked with inventory papers and smelling of old coffee. He shut the door with more force than necessary. What the hell was that? A customer needed help? Rachel kept her voice steady. "You caused a scene during the busiest hour of the week. You dropped plates. You ran across the dining room like the building was on fire." He crossed his arms. "I've had 3 tables complain about the disruption. A young woman was being treated poorly by our hostess. I helped her communicate." Rachel's jaw set. "That's part of customer service. That's not your job. Your job is to take orders and deliver food without drama." Phil's eyes narrowed. "This is your second warning this month. One more incident, and she'll keep this job." Dorothy's voice cut through from the doorway. Neither of them had heard her approach, because what I just witnessed was the most compassionate customer service I've seen in 40 years of dining out. Phil turned, his authority faltering. Dorothy Chun was more than a regular customer. Her late husband had been a city councilman. She still had connections, still wielded influence in Columbus's tightly connected community. "Mrs. Chun, this doesn't concern. It concerns me when I watch my favorite waitress demonstrate fluency in American Sign Language to help a distressed customer, while your hostess stood there escalating the situation." Dorothy's tone was gentle but immovable. "Rachel just saved you from a potential ADA complaint. I suggest you remember that." Phil's face cycled through several emotions before landing on grudging acceptance. "Fine. But Rachel, no more heroics. Just your job. Dorothy waited until Phil left before turning to Rachel with knowing eyes. How long have you been hiding? I don't know what you mean. Rachel's hand went to her locket unconsciously. My daughter is deaf. Honey, I know ASL when I see it. And I know the difference between someone who took a class and someone who's lived it. Dorothy stepped closer, her voice dropping. You signed like breathing. That was professional level fluency. So I'll ask again, how long have you been hiding? Rachel's carefully constructed walls cracked. 5 years. I had a master's degree. I was a certified interpreter. I advocated for deaf education. And then her voice broke. Then I had a student, a 17-year-old girl whose father was isolating her from the deaf community, controlling every aspect of her life, denying her autonomy. I reported my concerns to the proper authorities because I thought I was doing the right thing. Dorothy waited, patient. He destroyed me, sued me for breach of confidentiality, defamation, about 15 other things. He had unlimited money and lawyers. I had idealism and $30,000 in student loans. The settlement terms were brutal. I had to surrender my credentials, sign NDAs, accept that I'd never work in deaf education again. He made sure my name was mud in every community that mattered. Rachel's fingers clutched the locket harder. I changed my name, moved to Columbus, started over as someone invisible. That student. I never saw her again. The father made her disappear from my life completely. I don't know if she's okay. I don't know if she ever got the freedom she deserved. Rachel's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Sometimes I dream that she's still trapped, still voiceless. And I could have saved her if I just fought harder. Is that her? Dorothy nodded to the locket. Rachel opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photo. Younger Rachel with her arms around a teenage girl whose face was partially turned away from the camera. Dark hair shielding her features. They were both laughing, hands frozen mid-sign. I kept one photo. Everything else was destroyed in the settlement. Rachel closed the locket. She was brilliant, creative. She deserved better than what I gave her. Dorothy squeezed Rachel's hand. You gave her someone who saw her. Sometimes that's everything. Rachel wanted to believe that, but 5 years of guilt whispered otherwise. Now, before we continue to what happens next, I need to know something. If you discovered someone powerful was isolating and controlling another person, but speaking up would cost you everything, your career, your home, your entire future, would you stay silent to protect yourself, or would you risk it all to help them? Be honest in the comments below. There's no right answer. But your choice reveals how you'd navigate Rachel's impossible situation. And here's why you need to subscribe right now. Jonathan Westbrook is about to discover exactly who Rachel Martinez really is. When he does, his next move will shock you. Because this isn't just about a chance encounter in a diner. These two have a history, a devastating one. And in the next 24 hours, that history is about to explode in ways neither of them see coming. Also, have you dropped your location below? City or country? This story is resonating globally, and I want to know where my community of truth seekers is watching from. 2 days after the incident, Rachel's hands were still shaking when she opened her mailbox. The envelope had no return address, plain white. Her name typed across the front, Rachel Martinez. Something about the sterile precision of it made her skin crawl. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Columbus Business Journal, dated 3 weeks ago. The headline read, Access Tech Solutions CEO Jonathan Westbrook announces $500 million expansion. The photo showed him shaking hands with the governor, that calculated smile she remembered from the diner. Beneath the clipping, on a small card in handwritten script, he remembers you. Run. Rachel's apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. She grabbed her laptop with trembling fingers and typed his name into the search bar. The results flooded her screen. Jonathan Westbrook, founder and CEO of Access Tech Solutions. Net worth $2.3 billion. Forbes 400 list. Philanthropist, widower. Father to one daughter. Photo after photo of him at charity galas, technology conferences, accepting awards for innovation and accessibility technology. The irony tasted like metal in her mouth. She scrolled deeper, past the glowing profiles and press releases, searching for something. Anything that felt real. Then, on page 7 of the search results, she found it. A brief article from 5 years ago in a legal trade publication. Access Tech CEO settles lawsuit with former employee. No names, no details beyond breach of confidentiality and sealed settlement terms. But the date, March 2020, landed in Rachel's chest like a physical blow. That was her. That was when Jonathan Westbrook had destroyed her life. Her phone rang, the sudden sound making her jump. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Martinez? The voice was male. Careful. This is Marcus Chin. We met briefly at the diner. I work for Mr. Westbrook. Rachel's blood went cold. How did you get this number? I need to speak with you. Not on the phone. Can we meet? Every instinct screamed danger. Why would I? Because he's investigating you. And you deserve to know what's coming. Marcus's voice dropped. Please. The coffee corner on High Street. 30 minutes. I'm trying to help. He hung up before she could refuse. 28 minutes later, Rachel sat in a back booth of the coffee shop, her back to the wall, eyes on the door. Marcus entered right on time, looking over his shoulder before sliding into the seat across from her. Thank you for coming. He didn't order anything. His hands clasped tightly on the table. I don't have much time before he notices I'm gone. What do you want? Rachel's voice was harder than she felt. To warn you, Mr. Westbrook he's having you investigated. Background checks, financial records, employment history. He's trying to figure out who you are and why you helped Sophia. Why are you telling me this? Marcus's expression cracked slightly, revealing something like guilt. Because I've worked for him for 6 years, and I've watched him do this before. When he feels threatened, when he thinks someone is getting too close to his daughter, he doesn't just push back. He destroys. Rachel's hands clenched around her cold coffee cup. His daughter needed help. That's all I did. I know. I saw it. Marcus leaned forward. But you need to understand. Jonathan lost his wife 8 years ago. Caroline was killed in a car accident when Sophia was 14. She was deaf just like Sophia. They were driving home from a Gallaudet University tour when a drunk driver crossed the median. Rachel's breath caught. She hadn't known that. Jonathan wasn't in the car. He'd refused to go on the tour because he didn't want Sophia going to college so far away. Caroline took her anyway. They argued about it. Marcus's voice softened. After the accident, Jonathan blamed himself. But more than that, he blamed the world. He decided if he just kept them both safe at home, Caroline would still be alive. So he became obsessive about protecting Sophia from everything, every risk, every influence, every person who might take her away from him. That's not protection, Rachel whispered. That's a prison. I know. Marcus glanced toward the window nervously. 5 years ago, there was an incident. A tutor, someone who worked with Sophia. Jonathan said she was trying to manipulate Sophia, turn her against him. He made that person disappear. Legally, professionally, completely. I wasn't working for him yet, but I've seen the sealed files. The coffee shop's warmth couldn't touch the ice spreading through Rachel's veins. That tutor. Rachel's voice barely worked. Did you ever learn her name? Marcus met her eyes, and she saw the answer there before he spoke. The records are sealed. But Mr. Westbrook never trusted caregivers again after that. And now you've appeared, signing with his daughter, connecting with her in ways he can't. He stood abruptly. I've said too much. Just be careful. Whatever happened 5 years ago, he hasn't forgotten. And he won't let it happen again. Rachel sat alone in the coffee shop for 20 minutes after Marcus left, staring at her reflection in the black screen of her phone. Jonathan Westbrook didn't just remember her. He'd been waiting for her to resurface. Jonathan Westbrook sat in his home office, the city lights of Columbus spreading out below his penthouse windows like scattered diamonds. The private investigator's report lay open on his desk. 37 pages of Rachel Martinez's life, stripped bare and analyzed. Except it wasn't her real name. Rachel Martinez had appeared in Columbus 14 months ago with a social security number, credit history, and employment records that were technically legitimate but felt wrong. The PI had dug deeper. Real name, Rachel Mendoza. Age, 28. Master's in Deaf Education. Kent State University, 2018. Certified ASL Interpreter, 2019. Sued for defamation and breach of contract, March 2020. By anonymous, wealthy client. Settlement sealed. Teaching credentials surrendered. Current debt, $87,000. Current employment, the Maple Grove Diner. Current residence, studio apartment. Rent 3 days overdue. Jonathan's hands trembled slightly as he turned to the final page. The PI had included a photo, Rachel's graduation picture from Kent State, smiling and hopeful, her hands frozen mid-sign in the camera flash. He remembered those hands. 5 years ago, in his home, teaching Sophia signs he couldn't understand, having conversations with his daughter in a language that excluded him completely. Jonathan rose and walked to his private safe, entering the 12-digit code with practiced precision. Inside, beneath legal documents and property deeds, sat a red folder marked confidential, Mendoza's settlement. He'd hoped never to open it again. The documents inside told a story he'd rewritten in his memory so many times he almost believed his version. Rachel Mendoza, hired as Sophia's private ASL tutor when his daughter was 17. 3 months of sessions. Then the betrayal. Rachel had contacted social services, filed a report claiming educational neglect and emotional isolation. She'd accused him of keeping Sophia trapped, of denying her access to deaf culture and education. The accusations had been outrageous, dangerous. She'd been trying to turn his daughter against him, manipulate a vulnerable teenager, possibly even planning to extort money by threatening to go public. That's what his lawyers had argued. That's what the settlement had established. Jonathan closed the folder, but his hands wouldn't steady. His mother's voice echoed from the doorway. "You're spiraling again." Eleanor Westbrook stood in her silk robe, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She'd been staying at his penthouse for the past month, recovering from surgery. Now she crossed the office with the determined gait of someone who'd raised for children and wasn't impressed by billion-dollar empires. "I'm protecting Sophia." Jonathan's voice came out defensive. From a waitress who helped her when she was lost, Eleanor settled into the leather chair across from his desk. "Tell me the truth, Jonathan. What are you really afraid of?" "That woman isn't just a waitress. She's Rachel Mendoza, the tutor from 5 years ago. She's come back." Eleanor's expression shifted. "The one you sued? The one who tried to take Sophia away from me, who reported me to social services like I was abusing my own daughter." The old anger rose hot in his throat. "I protected our family from someone who wanted to exploit Sophia's vulnerability." "Or," Eleanor said quietly, "you silenced someone telling uncomfortable truths." The words hit like a slap. "Mother." Caroline wanted Sophia to go to Gallaudet. Eleanor's voice gentled but didn't yield. "Your wife spent her entire life hiding her deafness to fit into the hearing world, and it broke something in her. She wanted better for Sophia. You know this." Jonathan turned to the window, unable to meet his mother's eyes. Behind him, he felt her rise and approach. "Jonathan, look at me." He turned. Eleanor was holding something, a photograph he kept in his desk drawer, hidden beneath files. Caroline, his late wife, her hands frozen in sign language forming "I love you" toward the camera. Toward Sophia, who'd been taking the photo. "When was the last time you learned to sign?" Eleanor asked softly. "I hired interpreters. I didn't need to." "You built a wall between yourself and your daughter using other people's hands. And when someone tried to teach you both a better way, you destroyed her." The accusation settled in his chest like a stone. But it meant admitting everything. That Caroline had been right about Gallaudet, right about the isolation, right about his fear masquerading as protection. That Rachel Mendoza might have been trying to help, not harm. That he destroyed an innocent woman's life because facing the truth was too painful. Jonathan looked at his mother, then at the photo of Caroline signing words of love he'd never learned to return properly. "What have I done?" he whispered. But even as the question formed, another thought rose beneath it, darker, more desperate. "I can't let her expose this. Not now. Not ever." Eleanor seemed to read it in his face. "Jonathan, whatever you're planning, I need you to go to bed, Mother. It's late." She studied him for a long moment, disappointed recognition in her eyes. Then she left, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a judgment. Jonathan stood alone in his office, surrounded by the empire he'd built and the lies he'd told himself, and began planning how to silence Rachel Mendoza. Again, Thursday evening, 1 week after their first encounter. Rachel was halfway through her shift when she saw him walk through the door alone. No Sophia, no Marcus, just Jonathan Westbrook in another expensive suit, his eyes scanning the diner until they found her. Her stomach dropped. He walked directly to the hostess stand and requested Rachel's section. Brittany seated him at a booth in full view of the dinner crowd. 30 people eating, talking, living their lives, completely unaware they were about to witness something explosive. Rachel approached his table with her notepad, her professional mask firmly in place despite her racing heart. "Good evening, Mr. Westbrook. What can I get you?" He didn't speak. Instead, he pulled out a small notepad and pen, wrote something, and slid it across the table. "Coffee. Black. Burger medium rare." Rachel stared at the written order, recognition dawning cold and cruel. He was mimicking deaf communication, mocking it, testing her. "I can hear you just fine," she said quietly. "You don't need to write." Jonathan looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "I prefer this method. Is there a problem?" The calculated cruelty of it stole her breath. He was performing deafness as a power play, reducing her expertise to a joke, all while knowing exactly what it meant. Rachel's hands lifted before she could stop them. "I know you can hear me, Mr. Westbrook," she signed and spoke simultaneously. "The question is whether you can truly listen." His eyes flickered with something, surprise, maybe anger. "I don't know sign language." "You should learn. Your daughter's fluent." Rachel kept her voice level despite the trembling in her chest. "And your late wife was deaf, wasn't she? Seems like something a loving husband would have prioritized." The barb hit its mark. Jonathan's jaw clenched. "You know nothing about my wife. I know she'd be ashamed of how you're treating your daughter." The words escaped before Rachel could call them back. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice quiet enough that nearby tables couldn't hear, but sharp enough to cut. Interesting accusation from someone who's $87,000 in debt and facing eviction. "How much were you hoping to get out of my daughter? What's your angle this time, Ms. Mendoza?" Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. He knew. He knew everything. I'm sorry, I don't know who. Rachel Mendoza, Kent State graduate, former ASL interpreter, former defendant in a sealed lawsuit for breach of confidentiality and attempted exploitation of a minor. Jonathan's voice remained controlled, lethal. Did you think changing your name would hide what you are? A failed educator so desperate for money that you'd manipulate vulnerable deaf children for profit? The accusation rang across the diner. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Rachel's voice shook. That's not what happened. No? Then why did you sign a settlement admitting guilt? Why did you surrender your credentials? Why are you hiding under a false name working minimum wage if you're so innocent? Because you destroyed me for trying to help. The words exploded out of her. I help people because someone once silenced me for trying to do the right thing. Someone who had unlimited money and lawyers and didn't care about the truth. Only about maintaining control over a daughter he treats like property instead of person. The diner had gone completely silent. Dorothy stood up from her booth, her voice ringing clear. I've known Rachel for over a year. She's the most honest, compassionate person I've ever met. Whatever you think you know about her past, you're wrong. Are you her character witness? Jonathan's smile was cold. How well do you actually know her? Do you know she signed a legal document admitting to unethical conduct with a minor? I signed it because you gave me no choice. Rachel's hands were shaking now, anger and fear warring in her chest. You fabricated evidence. You forged documents. You used your money to turn truth into lies and made me choose between fighting a battle I couldn't afford or surrendering everything I'd worked for. I chose to survive, but that doesn't make what you did right. A customer 3 tables over had their phone up, recording. Jonathan saw it too. His control slipped for just a second, rage flashing across his face. I protected my family from someone who wanted to exploit my daughter's disability for personal gain. I wanted to help Sophia access the deaf community her mother wanted her to be part of. Rachel's voice cracked. I wanted her to have friends assigned, teachers who understand her, a future at Gallaudet like she dreamed. But you couldn't handle the idea of her having a life separate from your control. So you silenced anyone who suggested she deserved autonomy. I will not let you manipulate her again. Jonathan stood, his full height and power suddenly overwhelming in the small diner. I will make sure you never work with deaf communities again. I will ensure every organization, every advocacy group, every potential employer knows exactly what kind of person you are. Stay away from my daughter, or I will destroy what little you have left. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Rachel stood too, her body shaking but her voice steady. You already tried that once, Mr. Westbrook. It didn't work as well as you thought. She untied her apron, dropped it on his table, and walked toward the exit. Not running, not cowering, walking with her head up past the stunned diners, past Dorothy, who reached out to squeeze her hand, past the recording phone cameras, past Phil the manager who was rushing from the kitchen, shouting her name. She pushed through the door into the cold January night and kept walking. Behind her, the diner erupted into murmurs. Jonathan stood frozen at his table, surrounded by hostile stares and clicking phone cameras, realizing he'd just publicly threatened a woman for helping his disabled daughter. For the first time in his life, Jonathan Westbrook's money couldn't buy back the narrative. Rachel's phone buzzed 20 minutes later as she walked the dark Columbus streets with nowhere to go. Text from Phil, "You're fired. Don't come back." She almost laughed. Almost. Then she sat down on a bus stop bench in the freezing cold and let herself cry. Rachel's apartment felt more like a cell than a home. The eviction notice had been taped to her door for 2 days now. Bright orange paper screaming final notice. Vacate within 72 hours or face legal action. She'd stopped looking at it. Stopped pretending she had options. She sat at her laptop. The screen's blue light, the only illumination in the darkroom. Job application number 17 in 6 hours. Name, address, employment history, references. The cursor blinked in the reason for leaving last position field. What should she write? Fired for defending myself against a billionaire who destroyed my career 5 years ago? She clicked submit anyway. The automated response came 90 seconds later. Thank you for your interest. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. 17 applications. 17 rejections. Rachel checked her bank account. $127.42. Rent owed, $900. Days until homelessness, 11. Her phone sat silent on the table. No calls from friends. The few she'd had in her old life had stopped reaching out after the lawsuit, believing the lies Jonathan had spread or simply too afraid to be associated with her scandal. The community she'd built in Columbus was shallow. Co-workers she'd kept at arm's length. Customers like Dorothy, who cared but couldn't fix this. She was alone, completely, devastatingly alone. The envelope arrived at 9:47 p.m., slipped under her apartment door with a soft whisper of paper on tile. Inside was cashier's check for $25,000 and a single-page document, mutual non-disclosure and release agreement. Rachel's hands shook as she read the legal language. In exchange for the payment, she would agree to never contact Jonathan or Sophia Westbrook again, never speak publicly about their family or the previous lawsuit, never work in deaf education or advocacy, and release all claims against Jonathan Westbrook for past or future damages. At the bottom, a signature line waited for her name. $25,000. Enough to clear her rent, buy time. Maybe even relocate somewhere she could start over again. Again. Always again. All she had to do was promise to stay silent. To let Jonathan keep controlling Sophia. To abandon the fight she'd already lost once. Rachel's body began to break. It started in her chest, a tightness that spread to her throat, cutting off air. Her hands trembled so violently the paper rattled. Then the tears came hot and desperate, the kind of crying that's been held back too long and erupts like a physical wound opening. She sobbed into her hands, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Not the pretty crying for movies. This was ugly, animal, stripped of all pretense. Snot ran from her nose. Her breath came in gasping hiccups. She cried for the career she'd lost, the student she'd failed, the 5 years of poverty and shame and invisible survival. She cried because she was tired, so desperately, bone-deep tired of fighting battles she couldn't win against people who had infinite resources and zero conscience. The pen sat on her table. The signature line waited. She almost signed. God help her, she almost did it. 5 years ago, Rachel Mendoza had been someone different, someone hopeful. She'd graduated with her master's in deaf education with honors, thrilled to finally work in the community she loved. When the job posting appeared for a private ASL tutor for a wealthy family's deaf daughter, she'd been excited. The pay was excellent. The family was prominent. The daughter, Sophia, was 17 and brilliant, a young woman who deserved every opportunity. Rachel met Sophia in September 2019. Within 3 sessions, she saw the problem. Sophia was isolated. Her father, Jonathan Westbrook, controlled every aspect of her life. She'd been accepted to Gallaudet University, the premier institution for deaf education, but Jonathan refused to let her attend. Too far away. Too dangerous. Too many bad influences. Sophia had no deaf friends, no connection to deaf culture, no autonomy over her communication. Jonathan hired hearing interpreters for everything, keeping himself as the mediator of his daughter's every interaction. Rachel tried talking to Jonathan first, gently suggesting that Sophia needed peer connections, that deaf culture was vital to her identity, that Gallaudet could offer opportunities no private tutoring could match. Jonathan had smiled that cold smile and said, "I'm protecting my daughter from people who would exploit her vulnerability, like you're trying to do now." When Rachel persisted, showing him research about deaf children's social development and Caroline's documented wishes for Sophia's education, Jonathan had her banned from the house. But Rachel couldn't let it go. In December 2019, she filed a formal report with Child Protective Services expressing concerns about educational neglect and emotional isolation. The retaliation came like an avalanche. Jonathan's lawyers arrived with a lawsuit so vicious it took Rachel's breath away. They accused her of grooming Sophia for financial exploitation, of fabricating Caroline's wishes to manipulate a grieving family, of planning to extort money by threatening to go public with false abuse allegations. They had documents, emails Rachel had never written, session notes that had been altered, financial records that suggested she'd been researching the Westbrook family wealth. All fabricated, all perfectly legal in their forgery. Rachel's public defender was overwhelmed. The case was sealed to protect the minor's privacy, which meant Rachel couldn't defend herself publicly, couldn't show anyone the truth. The settlement terms were brutal. Admit to unethical conduct, surrender all teaching credentials, sign NDAs preventing her from ever speaking about the case, and pay $100,000 in damages. She negotiated it down to surrendering credentials and signing the NDA in exchange for Jonathan dropping the financial damages. But he'd already destroyed her reputation in every deaf education community that mattered. Word spread, vague, terrible, damning, misconduct with a minor, ethics violation, sealed settlement. No one would hire her. Her friends stopped calling. Her mentor told her to change careers. So Rachel Mendoza disappeared. Rachel Martinez was born. She moved to Columbus, changed her appearance, worked minimum wage jobs, and tried to forget that a 17-year-old girl named Sophia was still trapped. Until Sophia walked into her diner, lost and afraid. And Rachel couldn't stay invisible anymore. Rachel opened the locket at her throat with shaking fingers. The photo inside showed her younger self with her arm around Sophia, both of them laughing during a tutoring session. Sophia's hands were frozen mid-sign, probably telling a joke. Rachel remembered that day, 3 weeks before Jonathan destroyed everything. Sophia had just received her Gallaudet acceptance letter. They'd celebrated with cupcakes. "I'm sorry I stayed silent after," Rachel whispered to the photo, tears still wet on her face. "I'm sorry I let him win. I'm sorry I disappeared when you needed someone to keep fighting." She looked at the check, at the NDA, at the signature line. Then she picked up both papers and slowly, deliberately, tore them into pieces. The decision crystallized sharp and clear. She would document everything. Contact disability rights organizations. Expose Jonathan's pattern of control, even if it cost her everything again. She'd already lost everything once. She could survive it again. But Sophia deserved someone who wouldn't abandon her. Not this time. Rachel's plan is dangerous. Jonathan Westbrook has unlimited resources and he's already destroyed her once. But she's about to do something that will force this conflict into the public eye in a way neither of them can control. Before we continue, I need your prediction. How do you think Rachel wins this? Through evidence? Through moral appeal? Or through something we haven't seen yet? Drop your answer below. The coffee shop was different this time. Rachel had chosen it. A small place in German village where she knew Marcus wouldn't be recognized. She texted him from a burner phone. "I need to talk. I'm not signing anything. Meet me or don't." He'd arrived 15 minutes early. Paranoia evident in the way he checked every person who entered. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Marcus said as he slid into the seat across from her. Probably both. Rachel's hands were steady now. Clarity replacing desperation. I need information. He's planning something. After the diner incident, he's been in his office for hours, calling lawyers. Whatever you're thinking of doing, I'm going to the Access Tech press conference next week, the one where he receives the Accessibility Advocate Award. Rachel watched Marcus's face carefully. I'm going to ask him publicly how he can accept that award when his own daughter is denied access to the deaf community. Marcus's eyes widened. That's suicide. He'll destroy you in front of everyone. He'll have security remove you. He'll have to respond publicly, in front of media, in front of his board, in front of people who actually care about accessibility. Rachel leaned forward. Unless you can give me a reason not to. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his internal war visible on his face. Loyalty to his employer versus the conscience that had brought him here. Finally, Sophia's been emailing me. Rachel's heart stopped. What? For 3 months. She's been asking about you, asking if I know where you are, if you're okay. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages, turned the screen toward Rachel. Marcus, is she still at the diner? The woman who signed to me? Please tell me where she is. I saw her again today. She didn't see me. I was in the car. I wanted to go in so badly, but Father would know. I recognized her immediately. Did Father tell you? It's Rachel. My Rachel from before. She came back. Rachel's vision blurred, reading the messages. She recognized me the first day in the diner. She knew exactly who you were. Marcus's voice softened. She's been coming to the diner for 3 months, watching you from outside or sitting in corners where you wouldn't notice, building up courage to approach you. That night she got lost looking for the bathroom, she separated from her father deliberately, hoping you'd help her, hoping you'd sign, hoping you'd remember her. Tears streamed down Rachel's face. She's been looking for me? She never believed what her father said about you. She kept the emails you sent her, the ones Jonathan thought he deleted. She saved screenshots of your session notes. When she turned 18 last year, she gained access to her mother's trust documents, found her mother's will, found letters Caroline wrote about you, about how grateful she was that Sophia finally had a teacher who understood. Why didn't she just contact me directly? She's 22. But she's not free. Jonathan monitors her phone, her computer, her mail. Everything goes through him or his security team. The only privacy she has is a burner email account she accesses at a library. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his pocket. She asked me to give you this. Jonathan's schedule for next week. The press conference details. Security protocols. Everything you need. Rachel unfolded the paper, seeing Sophia's handwriting in the margins. Please come. Please don't give up on me again. I need you to fight. There's one more thing, Marcus said quietly. Your former colleague, Dr. Patricia Hayes from Kent State, she knows you're in Columbus. Someone tipped her off that you're planning something. She's already contacted Jonathan's legal team. Rachel's blood went cold. Patricia, her former mentor, who'd advised her to change careers after the lawsuit, who'd believed Jonathan's version of events. So he knows I'm coming. He's preparing a counter-strategy, documentation of your history of harassment, video evidence of you accosting his daughter at the diner. He's going to paint you as a dangerous stalker in front of everyone. Rachel looked at the schedule in her hands, at Sophia's pleading note, at the impossible battle ahead. Let him try, she said. I'm done staying silent. The Columbus Convention Center buzzed with the energy of 200 attendees. Tech journalists, disability advocates, Access Tech employees, local politicians, and representatives from national accessibility organizations. Camera crews from 3 local news stations positioned themselves strategically around the stage where Jonathan Westbrook stood in a perfectly tailored Navy suit, holding a crystal award etched with the words Accessibility Advocate of the Year. His speech had been flawless. Polished anecdotes about his company's mission, heartfelt references to his late wife's disability inspiring his work, carefully crafted language about bridging gaps and empowering communities. The audience applauded enthusiastically. "Now we'll open the floor for questions," the moderator announced. Rachel Martinez stood from her seat in the back row. Her hand rose. The moderator pointed to her. Yes, the woman in the blue sweater. Rachel's voice cut through the room, clear and steady. "Mr. Westbrook, how do you reconcile receiving an award for advancing accessibility when your own deaf daughter is denied access to the deaf community and prevented from attending Gallaudet University?" The room went silent. Camera operators swung their lenses toward her. Jonathan's expression froze for half a second before smoothing into practiced concern. "I'm sorry, I don't understand the premise of your question," he said smoothly. "My daughter receives every accommodation and support. Does she have deaf friends? Does she participate in deaf culture? Or do you keep her isolated, using interpreters as barriers so you maintain control over every conversation she has?" The journalist began scribbling furiously. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption." Jonathan signaled to security, but then his expression shifted, calculated, prepared. "Actually, let me address this. I believe this woman has a personal vendetta against my family." The screens behind him flickered to life. Documents appeared, court filings, settlement agreements with names redacted, employment termination notices. Jonathan's voice took on a tone of patient concern. 5 years ago, a former employee filed false accusations against me after being terminated for misconduct. She signed a legal settlement admitting to unethical behavior. Now she's stalking my daughter, approaching her at restaurants, attempting to reestablish inappropriate contact. His eyes found Rachel across the room. "I have video evidence of her accosting my daughter at a public establishment." The video played security footage from the Maple Grove Diner showing Rachel running across the dining room toward Sophia. Without sound, without context, it looked aggressive, predatory. The audience murmured. Some faces turned toward Rachel with suspicion. This was the moment, the trap he'd set. She could run, be escorted out by security, disappear back into invisibility, or she could step into the light completely. Rachel walked down the center aisle toward the stage microphone. Rachel's hands were steady as she reached the microphone. She looked directly at Jonathan, then turned to address the room. "Let me introduce myself properly." Her voice resonated through the sound system. "My name is Dr. Rachel Mendoza. I have a master's degree in deaf education from Kent State University. I was a certified ASL interpreter, and 5 years ago, I was the private tutor Mr. Westbrook just referenced, the one he destroyed for trying to help his daughter." She pulled a folder from her bag, holding up documents. "These are my original credentials, master's degree, certification records, letters of recommendation from the deaf education community. These are session notes from my 3 months working with Sophia Westbrook when she was 17 years old. And these," she held up another stack, "are copies of the Child Protective Services report I filed in December 2019, expressing concerns about educational neglect and emotional isolation." The journalist surged forward, cameras zooming in on the documents. "I reported that Sophia had been accepted to Gallaudet University, the premier institution for deaf education, but was being prevented from attending, that she had no deaf friends, no connection to deaf culture, no autonomy over her own communication, that her father was using his wealth and control to keep her trapped in isolation." Rachel's voice strengthened. Mr. Westbrook's response was to sue me for defamation, breach of confidentiality, and a dozen other charges. His lawyers fabricated evidence, emails I never wrote, financial records suggesting I was researching his wealth, altered session notes making me appear predatory. I was 23 years old with a public defender facing an army of corporate lawyers. The case was sealed to protect the minor's privacy, which meant I couldn't defend myself publicly. She looked at Jonathan, who had gone pale. The settlement terms required me to surrender all my credentials, sign NDAs preventing me from ever speaking about the case, and accept that I could never work in deaf education again. I didn't admit to anything. I agreed to those terms because the alternative was financial destruction through a trial I couldn't afford. Mr. Westbrook used the legal system as a weapon to silence someone telling uncomfortable truths about how he treats his daughter. Rachel held up her phone, showing the screen to the audience. These are messages I received in the past week from Mr. Westbrook's legal team, threatening me again for stalking his daughter. Except here's what actually happened. His daughter, Sophia, approached me at my workplace, the diner where I've worked minimum wage for 14 months under an assumed name because Mr. Westbrook destroyed my career. She was lost and scared, and our hostess was dismissing her because she couldn't speak. I helped her using ASL, the language I'm trained in, the language she needed. That's not stalking. That's basic human compassion. The audience's mood had shifted. Journalists were shouting questions. Board members in the front row looked between Rachel and Jonathan with dawning horror. I stayed silent for 5 years because I was terrified of this man's power. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not when Sophia is still trapped. Not when he's accepting awards for accessibility while denying his own daughter access to her community. Rachel stepped back from the microphone, her whole body trembling, but her voice never wavering. Then the doors at the back of the convention center opened. Sophia Westbrook entered with Marcus at her side, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was signing rapidly, her face flushed with emotion and determination. Marcus interpreted, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. My name is Sophia Westbrook. I am 22 years old. I am deaf, and I am done being silent about my own life. Jonathan half rose from his seat, shock and panic warring on his face. Sophia, you don't need to. He told me you abandoned me, Sophia signed, Marcus speaking her words. He said you took money and disappeared, that you never cared about me, only about exploiting my disability for personal gain. I believed him for 5 years because I was 17 and he was my father, and I didn't know how to question his version of reality. Sophia pulled out a tablet, displaying a document on the screen behind her. Last week I turned 22. I gained full access to my mother's trust documentation through her attorney, access my father had been blocking. In those files, I found my mother's video roll. The screen showed a frozen frame of a woman, Caroline Westbrook, sitting in what appeared to be a lawyer's office, her hands poised to sign. My mother recorded her wishes in ASL 2 months before she died. She wanted me to attend Gallaudet University. She wanted me to be part of the deaf community she never got to join. She wanted me to have the independence and autonomy she was denied. Sophia's hands moved faster, anger making her sign sharp. My father buried this video. He told me my mother wanted me protected and safe at home. He convinced me that her dying wish was for me to never leave him. He lied to me about my own mother's final words. Marcus's voice caught slightly as he continued interpreting. In my mother's journals, which were also in the sealed trust documents, she wrote about Rachel. Finally, a tutor who understands. Finally, someone who sees Sophia as whole, not broken. Rachel is teaching her that being deaf is not a limitation. It's a culture, an identity, a gift. I'm grateful beyond words. Sophia looked at her father, tears streaming down her face. Mom wrote that 1 month before she died. Rachel wasn't trying to exploit me, Father. She was honoring Mom's wishes, and you destroyed her for it. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions. Jonathan sat frozen, his carefully constructed narrative crumbling in real time. Sophia wasn't finished. She held up a worn sketchbook, its pages visible on the projection screen as she flipped through them. For 3 months, I've been going to the Maple Grove Diner. Not randomly, not by accident, because I recognized Rachel the first time my father took me there. Her hands moved deliberately, making sure every sign was clear. I didn't approach her immediately because I was scared. Scared my father would find out. Scared she wouldn't remember me. Scared she'd hate me for believing his lies about her. The sketches appeared on screen. Detailed pencil drawings of Rachel serving customers, carrying plates, laughing with Dorothy, tying her apron. Each drawing was annotated with ASL hand shapes. Poetry written in the visual language Rachel had taught her. The teacher who saw me as whole. Marcus, read the annotations. The woman who taught me I deserved a voice, not just someone else's words. She came back. She didn't forget me. Sophia pulled out another document. Older, weathered pages protected in plastic sleeves. These are more entries from my mother's journals. She documented her concerns about my father's overprotection, his refusal to learn ASL despite being married to a deaf woman, his need to control every aspect of her communication with the world. The projection screen showed Caroline's handwriting. I learned to speak orally to fit into Jonathan's world. I hid my deafness, pretended I was hearing enough, let him be my voice in public. I sacrificed my deaf identity for his comfort. I will not let that happen to Sophia. She deserves better. She deserves the community I was too afraid to claim. Sophia's voice broke as Marcus interpreted. My mother lived the isolation I've been trapped in. She gave up her true identity to make my father comfortable. And when she died, instead of honoring her wish for me to live differently, he repeated the exact pattern that made her so unhappy. She turned to Rachel, signing directly to her. You were trying to save me from my mother's fate. You were the only person brave enough to tell my father the truth. And he destroyed you for it, because he couldn't face that truth about himself. The evidence was complete, irrefutable, devastating. All eyes turned to Jonathan Westbrook. Jonathan's face had lost all color. His hands trembled as he gripped the podium. For 30 seconds he said nothing, just stared at his daughter, at the evidence of his wife's unhappiness, at the destruction he'd caused. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, the microphone barely catching it. I was terrified of losing her like I lost her mother. The room went silent, waiting. Caroline and Sophia were driving to Gallaudet for a campus tour. I had refused to go. I didn't want Sophia going to college across the country. We argued. I said terrible things about how she was abandoning me, how she was ungrateful, how I knew what was best. His voice broke. Caroline took her anyway, and on the drive back, a drunk driver crossed the median. Tears ran openly down his face now, his professional facade completely shattered. If I had just gone with them, if I hadn't argued, if I had supported what Caroline wanted instead of fighting it, she'd still be alive. I convinced myself that control was love, that if I just kept Sophia close, kept her safe, kept her away from anything that might take her from me, I could prevent it from happening again. He looked at Rachel, his eyes red. I destroyed your life to protect mine. There's no excuse. You were trying to help my daughter access the life her mother wanted for her. And I punished you for it, because facing that truth meant facing that I killed my wife's dreams long before the accident killed her. The confession hung in the air, raw and broken. I'm sorry, he said to Rachel. I'm sorry for what I did to you, for the lawsuit, the lies, the 5 years of poverty and hiding. I'll make restitution, money, credentials, legal vindication, whatever it takes. But I know an apology doesn't erase consequences. Rachel stood tall, her voice steady despite tears on her own face. You're right. It doesn't. An apology is just words, Mr. Westbrook. Sophia deserves agency, not your guilt. She deserves the freedom to make her own choices, even if those choices terrify you. Can you give her that? Jonathan looked at his daughter, seeing her clearly, perhaps for the first time. Yes, he whispered. I can try. The media erupted like a dam breaking. Journalists surged forward, shouting questions. Microphones thrust toward the stage. Camera flashes created a strobe effect. The moderator had completely lost control of the event. Mr. Westbrook, will you be stepping down from Access Tech? Sophia, are you pressing charges against your father? Rachel, will you be filing civil suit? Is Access Tech's board aware of these allegations? Through the glass walls of an adjacent conference room, Rachel could see exactly what was happening. 5 board members had convened an emergency meeting, their faces grave. Papers were being passed around. One board member, an elderly woman in a wheelchair, was visibly angry, her voice rising loud enough to penetrate the glass. Within 30 minutes, a statement would be drafted. Within 2 hours, Jonathan Westbrook would be asked to step down as CEO pending an investigation into the company's alignment with accessibility values. But that was later. Right now, Sophia stood at the microphone, Marcus beside her, and signed her decision. I am enrolling at Gallaudet University for the spring semester, Marcus interpreted, his voice strong and clear. I am accepting control of my mother's trust fund, which includes sufficient resources for my education and independence. My father will no longer have financial control over my life. Jonathan flinched, but said nothing, his surrender complete. I am hiring Rachel Mendoza as my personal educational consultant, not as my employee or subordinate, but as my partner in navigating the deaf community and academic world that should have been mine 5 years ago. If she'll accept. All eyes turned to Rachel. She was crying openly now, nodding. And my father, Sophia's hand slowed, her expression softening slightly, will commit to family therapy, which I will attend with him voluntarily, not because he demands it, but because I choose to. He will fund a deaf accessibility foundation that I will lead, with board oversight to ensure it truly serves the community and not his ego. She looked at Jonathan, her signs deliberate. I love you, Father, but your love has been suffocating me. If you want to be part of my life going forward, you'll learn to love me on my terms, not yours. Jonathan's shoulders shook with silent sobs. He nodded, unable to speak. From the back of the room, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. I've been streaming this entire event live. Dorothy Chin stood with her phone held high, a triumphant smile on her elderly face. Rachel recognized her immediately, the witness who'd been there from the beginning. 2.3 million people are watching right now, Dorothy announced. And the video's been shared 47,000 times in the last 40 minutes. The world is watching Mr. Westbrook. The world knows the truth. The journalists turned their cameras toward Dorothy, then back to the stage, understanding they were witnessing something that would dominate news cycles for days. Rachel approached Jonathan slowly. He looked up at her, broken and humbled, waiting for her judgment. I don't forgive you, she said quietly, but her words carried through the microphone. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I accept your commitment to restitution, to therapy, to letting Sophia be free. That's a start. She extended her hand. After a long moment, Jonathan took it. Not a reconciliation, a truce, a beginning. The Access Tech board members emerged from their conference room. The lead board member approached the podium, her expression grim. Access Tech Solutions is committed to authentic accessibility advocacy. We will be conducting a full investigation into today's allegations. Effective immediately, Mr. Westbrook is taking a leave of absence from his CEO duties. We will be working with Ms. Mendoza and disability advocacy organizations to ensure our company's practices align with our stated values. The moral and restorative justice had been delivered. Publicly, irrevocably, Jonathan Westbrook's empire hadn't crumbled, but it had been fundamentally challenged. Sophia had claimed her agency. Rachel had reclaimed her voice. The invisible had become visible. 3 revelations. 3 pieces of truth that dismantled a billion-dollar lie. Rachel's identity. A woman destroyed for helping. Sophia's connection. A daughter trapped by love, disguised as control. The evidence. A mother's dying wish, buried by a man too afraid to honor it. So let me ask you, who's the real hero in this story? Rachel, who risked everything twice. Sophia, who found the courage to claim her agency. Or even Jonathan, who finally faced his truth. Drop your answer below. If you've made it this far, through all the pain, the revelations, the justice, you're part of this community that believes invisible people deserve to be seen. Subscribe right now because next week's story is even more shocking. The homeless man who slept outside Goldman Sachs was actually a former partner gathering evidence. His case ended at the Supreme Court. Drop a fire emoji if you're still watching. Welcome to the Truth Seekers. 3 weeks later, Rachel stood in her new apartment, a 1-bedroom in the short North District with actual sunlight streaming through clean windows. Not luxurious, but hers. Paid in full for 6 months with money from Jonathan's restitution settlement. $150,000 for lost wages, emotional distress, and destroyed career prospects. Her debt was cleared, all $87,000 of it. The collections calls had stopped. The eviction notice was a distant memory replaced by a signed lease in her real name. Rachel Mendoza, not Martinez, not invisible anymore. On her desk sat a letter from the Ohio Department of Education. Her ASL interpreter credentials had been restored following a formal review supported by 3 national disability rights organizations. The Ethics Committee had issued a public statement clearing her of all misconduct allegations. Her record was clean. She'd been offered an adjunct teaching position at Columbus State Community College. Introduction to American Sign Language, 2 sections. Starting in the spring semester. Not her dream job, not yet, but a beginning, a foundation to rebuild on. Rachel looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Same face, but different eyes. She still flinched when men in expensive suits walked past her on the street. Still felt her chest tighten when official-looking envelopes arrived in the mail. Still woke up some nights from dreams where lawyers were chasing her through endless courtrooms. But now she didn't look away. She looked them in the eye until they passed. She opened the envelopes immediately instead of letting them pile up in dread. She called her therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, covered by the Ohio Victim Services Program, and talked through the nightmares until they lost their power. Healing wasn't linear. Some days she felt strong. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. But she was healing, slowly, genuinely. Her phone chimed, a video call from Sophia. Rachel answered, smiling at the young woman's face filling the screen. I finished my Gallaudet application, Sophia signed, her expression bright with excitement. Early admission. I'll hear back in 6 weeks. You're going to get in, Rachel signed back. Your essay was brilliant. They've been video calling daily for 3 weeks now, practicing academic ASL, discussing Sophia's coursework, planning her transition to independent living. Their relationship had evolved from teacher-student into something more equal. Mutual respect between 2 women who'd survived the same man's control and come out the other side stronger. My father wants to say hello, Sophia signed, her expression complicated. Rachel's stomach tightened, but she nodded. Jonathan appeared on screen, looking older than he had 3 weeks ago. Tired, humbled. Rachel, thank you for taking my call. This is Sophia's call, Rachel said carefully. I'm here for her. I know. I wanted you to know I started ASL classes. Real ones, not the app-based tutorials I'd been pretending were sufficient. I'm terrible at it, but I'm trying. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to erase what he'd done, but it was something. Keep trying, Rachel said. Sophia deserves a father who can communicate with her in her language. Jonathan nodded and handed the phone back to his daughter. After they hung up, Rachel sat at her desk and pulled up her laptop. She'd been offered a consulting position with the National Association of the Deaf, helping develop ethics guidelines for families navigating deaf education. 20 hours a week, remote work, meaningful impact. She accepted the position. Rachel opened her locket. Sophia's photo still inside, but now joined by a new photo. Both of them at the press conference, signing together, visible and unashamed. One thing was still broken. Rachel struggled to trust institution systems, hierarchies. She worked independently, kept her own hours, maintained control over every aspect of her professional life. The fear of being trapped again, of being vulnerable to someone else's power, hadn't healed yet. Maybe it never would, but she was building a life anyway, scarred, careful, real. For months later, late August, Washington, D.C., the Gallaudet University campus sprawled green and vibrant, students signing animatedly as they moved between buildings. Rachel walked beside Sophia, carrying a box of dorm supplies, both of them laughing at Sophia's nervous energy. I can't believe I'm actually here, Sophia signed, her hands trembling slightly. Believe it, Rachel signed back. You earned this. They were setting up Sophia's dorm room, small but sufficient, a space entirely her own, when someone knocked on the door. Marcus Chin stood in the hallway, looking different somehow. It took Rachel a moment to recognize what had changed. He wasn't wearing the business suit and earpiece she'd always seen him in. He was dressed casually, and his expression was more open, less guarded. Marcus. Sophia signed in surprise. What are you doing here? He stepped inside, then did something completely unexpected. His hands lifted, and he began signing. I came to apologize properly, in the language I should have been using all along. Rachel's breath caught. You sign? Marcus nodded, continuing in ASL. I've been deaf since I was 8 years old. Meningitis. I wear cochlear implants that give me functional hearing, but I'm culturally deaf. I've hidden it my entire adult life. Sophia's face showed shock, then anger. You work for my father. You knew what he was doing to me. You could have. I know. Marcus's signing became more urgent, apologetic. I needed the job. I have student loans, medical bills, family obligations. Jonathan paid well, and I convinced myself I was doing good, helping an accessibility company from the inside. But really, I was betraying my own community. Betraying you. His hands dropped for a moment before rising again. I was his spy in the deaf community. He'd send me to deaf events, conferences, gatherings. I'd report back about what people were saying, what organizations are doing. I helped him maintain control while pretending to be an ally. I'm ashamed of what I did. Rachel felt anger rising, but also recognition. Survival made people do complicated things. She knew that better than anyone. I quit after the press conference, Marcus continued. I'm working as an accessibility consultant now, legitimately this time, and I'm reconnecting with the deaf community I abandoned for money and safety. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, then signed. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're telling the truth. But trust takes time. I know, Marcus signed. I'll earn it. After he left, Rachel helped Sophia unpack in silence for several minutes before Sophia asked, Did you know about my mother? That she was deaf and hid it? Rachel shook her head. Jonathan mentioned she had a disability, but I never knew the details. Sophia pulled out a folder from her bag. More of Caroline's journals. She learned to speak orally perfectly. She passed as hearing in most situations. She never connected with deaf culture, never attended deaf events, never signed in public. My father loved her, but he loved the version of her that fit his world. She wrote about how exhausting it was, how lonely, how she wanted me to have the community and identity she denied herself. Rachel read the entries, seeing a pattern that made her chest ache. Jonathan hadn't just repeated his control with Sophia. He'd learned it with Caroline first. His late wife had taught him, through her own accommodation of his discomfort, that love meant making deaf people fit into hearing spaces rather than building bridges between worlds. That's why this matters so much, Sophia signed. I'm not just escaping my father's control. I'm breaking a cycle that trapped my mother too. I'm claiming the identity she couldn't. Through the window, they could see students gathering on the quad, hands moving in animated conversation. A whole community communicating in the language Sophia had been denied for so long. She was home. Finally, if you were touched by this story, support us by subscribing to the channel now. Hit the notification bell and drop your answer to this question in the comments. What hidden skill, credential, or expertise do you have that would shock people who only see your current job title? 6 months later, the Columbus State Community College classroom buzzed with energy. 23 students sat in a circle, hands moving through the ASL alphabet with varying degrees of competence. At the front, Rachel Mendoza demonstrated the proper hand shape for the letter R. Beside her, Sophia Westbrook circulated through the students, correcting finger positions, offering encouragement, her teaching assistant role, giving her purpose and confidence. In the back row, the oldest student in the class struggled with the signs, his movements stiff and unpracticed. Jonathan Westbrook attended every Tuesday and Thursday session, learning the language his wife and daughter had spoken their entire lives. He was terrible at it, but he showed up. After class, Jonathan approached Rachel carefully. I still can't sign "I'm sorry" correctly. Keep practicing, Rachel said, her tone neutral but not cruel. You'll get there. They were friends. Might never be. But there was mutual respect now. The complicated relationship between someone who caused harm and someone who survived it, both trying to do better. On Rachel's desk sat Sophia's graduation photo, fast-forwarded 4 years into a hopeful future. And beside it, a new envelope marked "Another story you need to hear," with a photo of a young woman in a janitor's uniform, her eyes holding secrets. Rachel signed to her next student. I see. You're not invisible to me. The lesson continued. The cycle of recognition and dignity passed forward like light.